Hello and welcome to our second live session. I'm James Robinson. I'm going to be your host for this video session. Today we've got a very special session for you. I'm joined by 3 educators from around the world who have worked with Raspberry Pi in previous situations, and they're going to talk to us a little bit about their journey into teaching computing. For many people who have entered computing teaching from a background of ICT or other subjects, it can be quite a daunting task. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the challenges we might face, some of the ways of overcoming those, and we're going to talk a little bit about activities that we could use with our students. So the format of today's session is going to be fairly simple. We're going to have 4 questions. If you want to contribute a question to our panel, ask a question of our panel, then if you ask that in the YouTube comments, then we will collect some of those towards the end, and time allowing, we will ask those of our educators. So we're going to go away now and we're going to introduce our educators, and we're going to start with our first question. So the first question I'd like to ask each of our educators by way of an introduction is to give us a little bit of an intro as to their background, how they came to be a teacher of computing, and just say a little bit more about themselves. So Alex, if we can first of all go to Donna, that's where we're going to go first of all. And as soon as we're ready, Donna's going to answer that question.
I'm working as a primary teacher with Key Stage 2. My route into teaching computing was probably that I was the only one who at some point could change the ink on the printer and sort of got roped in that way, I think. And then I've just progressed. I just have a real passion for showing the children what the capabilities, the possibilities of computing are, and it's just hooked me in, and I feel that if I've got the enthusiasm, then that will pull them in as well, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Donna. And we're seeing a little bit of a clip here from your classroom, which we've sort of set up as a makerspace, and maybe we'll say a bit more about that later on. And I think we're really lucky to be joined by Matt over in the States. It's very early in the morning for him, so I'm very grateful for him to come and join us on this call. So Matt, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about how you came to computing?
Hello, I'm Matt Cronin. I'm the Director of Technology at the Marblehead Charter School in Marblehead, Massachusetts. We're about 45 minutes north of Boston. And like Donna, it's been a little bit of a circuitous route for me. I was a history and English teacher by trade. And then when our tech director left for greener pastures, our administrator at the school asked, well, you know, I was doing work with websites and wikis and podcasts with the students. They figured, hey, you could do this role. And I sort of jumped into the role without a net and learned a lot about programming, learned a lot about networking, sort of on the fly. So it's been a very interesting journey. And like Donna, I have that, you know, sort of that natural inclination to want to tinker and play around with, you know, a lot of these ideas and concepts and languages. But it's one of those areas where every day you sort of find a new thing that you don't know or you're unfamiliar with. So I've been lucky to find things like the Raspberry Pi, like Scratch, and other communities of educators who have been very supportive with that. So I've been lucky.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to have you with us. And we'll hear finally from Lindsay, who's joining us from sort of the south of England. So Lindsay, do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey to computing?
And I did things like project management, network rollouts, technical installations, that sort of thing. And I made the jump across to teaching accidentally. After I'd had children, we moved out of London and we now live in the Welsh borders. And the school here fell short of a computing person, just as I was getting, ready to go back in to careers. My office in the corporate side of things used to be like Santa's workshop, always trying out new kit before delivering it to users. And actually, it's much like that now, and for different reasons. I'm surrounded by students making and creating all kinds of things, and it's a hugely exciting environment to work in.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you to you all. And I think it's really interesting that all of us, me included, I mean, I haven't really shared my journey, but I think all of us have had that journey into computing where we weren't trained as computing teachers. It's not necessarily our background. We have been brought into this either because we've had some skills, whether they're kind of fairly simple skills that have been recognized, or we've got a passion for it. I think the key thing is that we have that drive and that energy and that passion to bring computing and computer science to our students. That's fantastic. So I'm going to move on straight into some really sort of some activity type stuff. So I'd like you to share with me an activity, and with the audience, wider audience, share with me an example of a computing lesson or an activity that has excited your students the most. This time we're going to start with Matt, and I've got an image to put on the screen, haven't I here, Matt? So Matt, over to you.
Excellent. So when I first jumped into this role, MIT had released Scratch along the same time, which was fortunate for me because I was afraid my technology classes would be primarily typing practice and formatting in Word. And along came this programming environment that was very visual and accessible for students in our school. And we did several Scratch projects as part of our class. And I had been doing it sort of just as my own little corner of the school, trying out this programming environment, having the students make little games or music projects or art projects. And then I had one student who came along and took some content that they were studying in their history class about the Battle of Yorktown during the American Revolution, and then began to be very interested in the military aspects and the troop movements and casualty rates and all of these things, and began to code and simulate that battle in Scratch. And he did this independently, and I was completely floored by it. One, that the student would take content from one of their classes and, without any prompting from me, see Scratch as a way to kind of express that understanding and be able to use the code to model or simulate what was going on. And not only, it was also floored me because why didn't I think of that? Here's a chance to integrate and support some of the content they were doing in their classes, as well as reinforce some of the programming concepts that we were trying to share with the students. So it was this, mutually beneficial process that we had. So I've got a picture of the Scratch screen up where you can see the little blocks to represent troop movement, and the student had to program them in. And when a casualty would happen during the battle, he would have that block fade away to indicate, the loss of troops and their movement across the battlefield. And the engagement that student had with that particular project, partially because it probably wasn't an assignment and it was something he chose, but that he's also able to show his historical knowledge as well as his understanding of the programming environment. It was impressive. And ever since then, I've tried to find these connections between what's going on in the other classes and being able to see if we can have the programming give the students ability to represent what they know in another format, and to maybe formalize it and then be able to see what that code looks like and tinker around with it so it can sort of represent what they've been working on. Scratch has always sort of been my go-to gateway to get kids into programming. And if it ever fails, it's because a lot of times the student is either resistant or is deliberately trying to avoid it. But most kids take to it like walking. So I'm glad to have that tool in the tool belt.
That's great. Thank you very much, Matt. I think it's really interesting to hear about the idea that the students' passions and interests and their sort of existing learning is kind of what drives in this kind of activity. And that's great. We're going to hear from Lindsay as well. So Lindsay, if we can switch over to you, and in about sort of 30 seconds to a minute, if you can tell us a little bit about the activity that you want to talk about, and I'll get some pictures here on the screen for you.
I've put up a couple covering different age ranges, really. I found that a lot of the students are very excited by hardware and the interaction between hardware and software. And so they love getting the cases off, and that's been a really nice way and actually an inexpensive way for schools on a budget to get students excited about the computer and what's going on inside it, looking at the components and how they interrelate, and the students building a better understanding of how the software works and why the software works in a particular way. And so you can see we've got little people dealing with a standard motherboard towards the top of that set of images. Towards the left, we've got a Raspberry Pi that was the internal payload of a high-altitude balloon project. This is a project that ran with students from year 7 to year 13. And actually, it was the year 13 students who were really instrumental in running it and teaching little ones to solder without torching themselves. And that was really exciting. That was a big project last year. So that engaged lots of people. And again, it was kind of inexpensive, quick, straightforward, with a ton of different skills. And for the software aficionados, we built the school in Minecraft. And that again was engaging for students from a whole range of different backgrounds and skill levels. We had people who were builders and people who were photographers, and then those who just did graphic rendering. And it was a great way to get some of the more advanced ones working as sysadmins and managing Blade servers and so on. So, yeah.
That's great, Lindsay. Thank you. And again, I think what comes across quite a lot there is context being really, really important. Let's hear from Donna, and then perhaps we'll reflect on the answers that we've had from all three of you. So, Donna, again, you've got a couple of images which we kind of will show while you're talking. So, what about your activity? What would you want to talk about?
The activity that I think that engaged the children initially, I have a lunchtime maker club, and I work with digital leaders. We entered a competition about 2 years ago, organised by the fantastic Claire Garside, who's now working independently, to create a Rube Goldberg style machine, which was a complicated machine to do a simple task. And the task our end task was to turn on a computer. And we decided our end task would be we would turn on a Raspberry Pi computer. And I didn't. The children literally designed everything themselves. I let them loose with the saws and wood and balsa and glue guns, and they just ran with it. So we had ball runs, we had catapults, we had minions being levered up into the air and placed back down again. We also incorporated some carding from the old mill machines. So the screen, oh, it's not there. There's like a screen that we use the carding machines with the punch holes in to reveal and cover over things that we were using. And then the final result was the treasure map. You can see there was literally like the start, the X and the enter to set the Raspberry Pi going. And then the screen just revealed this fantastic screen to do with maker education. The children entered the competition, and then they won a 3D printer for the school as a result of the competition. They did a really good job, and from then on the Maker Club's just grown. They want to get involved in making things and doing things, and a lot of it isn't digital, but I'm trying to harness what the children are interested in already and then watch what they're doing and where they veer towards with their interests, and then pull it in. If they're making a cardboard robot, I would say to them, now we can put a couple of LEDs in that, we can put a motor in it, we can attach it to this, and we can move it along that way.
That's fantastic. I think it's really interesting that all three of our educators have talked about really interesting and engaging contexts. I don't think we've talked in that conversation about any specific or particular concepts being interesting, but we talked a lot about the context in which they're delivered. So that's been really interesting. And I think there's something about the hands-on nature of computing, being able to play with craft material and do construction and lead the learning from the students' interests. So I think that's really interesting. So the next question that I have for each of you, this is clearly a difficult thing to do. There are challenges that people are going to face bringing computing into their curriculum or becoming a computing teacher. So the question for each of you is to tell me a bit about the biggest challenge you faced and briefly how you overcame that challenge. And this time we're going to go to Lindsay first. Lindsay, would you like to tell us about the biggest challenge you faced?
I think time is a huge challenge. For physical computing activities, it can be particularly difficult to get a whole class set up in time for a lesson and then dismantled again afterwards. And so for some of those sorts of activities, we hive them off into lunchtime or after school clubs, we run a weekend activity every couple of weeks in the afternoon, where lots of makers and builders come together from the region, not just our school, and build stuff together in different teams and groups. It can help actually also to do some offline activities, not necessarily just rely on the technology. So, for example, doing sorting algorithms outside on the lawn and getting the students to sort each other. It's quite kinesthetic, it sticks well, it's memorable, doesn't involve loads of kit. In terms of the out of the lesson extracurricular activities, there are so many different competitions and hacks and events that you can set up and be a part of, and there are always people who are really willing to help. They might be parents, they might be STEM ambassadors in the area, and so it's well worth crowdsourcing from your local community.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, you've got some really nice pictures there of different things, and I know we've spoken about these before, but I think the competition side of things in that informal setting is a really great way of testing out ideas, trialing things in a sort of safe environment where you don't need quite so much kit. So that's great. Time and kit is definitely a big challenge. Donna, how about yourself? What challenges have you faced in becoming a computing teacher?
Right, I have a list similar to Lindsay's, which says outdated equipment, tech issues, time, network restrictions. I also think, from the point of view that the skills of the children, the IT skills of the children and the confidence of the children, I think a lot of the children, in my experience, are used to swipe screens. They'll come in to try and swipe a monitor. They want touch screens. They don't know what... they're frightened of the computers, I think. I think that's a big issue for a lot of the primary children, and it's a case of telling them they can't break it, they just need to get on with it and do it. The worst they can do is maybe lose their work if they've not saved it once upon a time, and then they won't do that again anyway. They'll sort of learn, it's sort of this fail to learn thing. In terms of equipment, I use a lot of unplugged activities, which again, like Lindsay says, will get around a lot of the difficulties, and they're fantastic activities. The children love them. There's so much more hands-on. The barefoot activities, CS Unplugged, Raspberry Pi have a fantastic bank, and also linking with computing at schools and being able to loan equipment as a CAS master teacher as well and bring those into school, or take children out for days to experience events that way as well. Gets over a lot of the issues of budget and not having those physical kits in school all the time.
Thank you. That's great, Donna. I think just a follow-up question for you, Donna, if I may. I know because you've done a lot of work around this as well. You talk about kids being afraid of the computer and they're being slightly tentative. How important do you think resilience for students is, and how do we build that resilience within our learners? Resilience
is exceptionally important. We build it. I build it personally by, I have like a bank of videos, lesson introductions and things that I would do outside the computer, show them they're a lot smarter than a scratch cat, for instance. Set them up with, if I set a Bee-Bot and yourself walking 30 steps and there's a door in the way, hopefully you will not bump into it, you will open the door, you will turn to me and say, I can't go any further. That Bee-Bot or that robot will just carry on bouncing off that door continually, just showing them that they can't necessarily process as quickly as a computer, but they're quite capable of lots of things going on and processing at the same time.
I think, that, and I think there's things sort of around the idea of growth mindset and lots of positive reinforcement, and we have to kind of be patient with our students and learners who don't necessarily, we think of them as digital natives, but perhaps we overestimate how comfortable they are with technology once we take them away from their apps and their phones and so on. So that's great. And then Matt, I wonder if you've got anything that you would like to share about the biggest challenges you've faced within your journey.
My biggest challenge starting out easily was me. It was my lack of experience, and what that played out as is feeling the need to sort of overcompensate and have all the answers for the students when they ran into a challenge, and feeling like I needed to be the one who solved that problem for them. So, I would be the expert in the room. And that usually sort of set up this counterproductive cycle with the students who would sort of be dependent upon me, to proceed when they got stuck. And as I became more confident, it became apparent to me that that wasn't the right ways. And my role isn't there just to provide answers to the students, but to begin nudging them in the right direction, and not to have all the answers, and and be stumped sometimes about the problem that they solve, and point those out as interesting problems, and maybe build up some of that resiliency that you were just talking about, in terms of being able to see, well, this isn't a failure, this is a momentary little blip, and there's a way to figure out a solution around that, and not feel that just because this one thing happened that there's that the whole thing will fall apart. So I think I needed to be able to take a step back and realize that I didn't need to know all the answers.
I think, yeah, I mean, that's really important, that confidence and the empowerment, not just of our students, but of ourselves. We have to kind of be able to step into that role where we don't know everything. And that can be quite scary, but also quite empowering. I certainly found that part of my journey. Once I kind of reconciled that, it was a really empowering kind of feeling. Okay, so we're all at slightly different stages of our journey, and we're sort of this journey is not going to end. But if you could look back on a few years ago, travel back in time and give yourself a piece of advice before you started to teach computing, what would be the one nugget of advice that you would share with your past self? And I think we're going to go straight back to Matt on that one, actually.
And I think I'd build off my previous comment. Sometimes I say this to the teachers is, sometimes I need to be a little less helpful, and instead of being the one to answer the questions, to be able to step back, have the kids realize what resources they have available to them, learn, have them develop some of those problem-solving abilities, and not be, dependent on just like following the instructions, or somebody else to come in and rescue them, because that that can set up a sort of this unhealthy dynamic in the classroom.
That's great, and I think building on what you were saying before, I think that's a really good piece of advice, and I think there's lots of people who are further along their journey, or along this journey, that would be giving that same piece of advice to their past selves in this hypothetical scenario. And then Donna, same question to you. What advice would you give to past Donna?
Building on the growth mindset and resilience, I think I would have introduced things a lot sooner to the children, not been so tempted to take the mouse out of people's hands and just try and fix everything for them. I still on occasion have to stop myself from doing that, I think. Give them those self-help skills and tell them that until they've tried all those self-help strategies, that I am their last point. I'm not being unhelpful. I'm their last point of contact. They can use peer programming. They can look at other people's screens and see whether that mirrors theirs, and they can ask somebody how they managed to get to do whatever that is. They can right click the mouse, which is a big one. There's loads of hints on there. They can do lots of things for themselves. Just not to be scared, just to get stuck in there, press a few buttons, click on, click off. It doesn't matter. They literally can't break it unless they're physically abusing the machine. There's not a lot they can do that will totally obliterate, their work. And they're so much prouder of themselves when they've done that as well, that they've done it for themselves. I have a light bulb. You can't. Oh yeah, you can see the light bulb sort of hanging up there. They have a light bulb. They can pull the light bulb on if they have a light bulb moment. They'll get a tag for that. There's lots of things going on in here. I have brain reward hats for thinking really clearly while they're working. I'll come along and pop those on their heads. So it's all these things that are encouraging them, telling them how fantastic they are, how wonderful their brains are, and it is that fail to learn again, like Matt says, explore, get it wrong, work out why it's wrong, self-correct. It gives them a buzz. It makes them feel so much more proud of their achievements, definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things you said there that were really interesting. I mean, all of it, but I think there was 2 points I want to kind of pick up on. One was this idea about not touching the kit. There's something really like, if you were in an English lesson and your teacher came over and took your pen out of your hand and wrote something in your book for you, that's quite advertising, right? But we do it. Oh, I've done it. I'm guilty of this in the past. You walk over, let me just help you out. Take the mouse over and do something for them. And I think it's a really important thing that as facilitators we stop ourselves doing that, and we don't let them do it to other people. You go and explain that concept to somebody else. Get student A to help student B and get them to talk them through it rather than do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
your past self?
I think that there's always a B plan. And so if you have a power cut, or if you find that the lesson plan that you're trying out for the first time was just disastrous for some reason, actually, it's okay. There is always a B plan. For the students, it's really important, I think, that they can feel allowed to fail. They can be allowed to get it wrong, that they don't feel always pressurized to get it right, and certainly not right first time. So fail, sail, second attempt in learning, tail, and so on and so forth. And also helping them to understand that it's an iterative process, it's a developmental process. And so you can make it work and then you can make it elegant after that, or you can make it work better. You can refine your algorithm. So that would be thing one. And thing two would be to crowdsource. Make the most of all the people out there who are so willing to help. Twitter's a fantastic resource. So Kaz Chat on Tuesday nights is great. Lots of communities where people are really willing to pool ideas. And that's how the students work as well in some of the clubs, the extracurricular ones. Seeing one child who's great with JavaScript help somebody else, but that other person who has different skills, maybe with hardware, helping child A. It's a collaborative process.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think, and again, this idea of this collaboration just within the classroom, but also outside the classroom is really important. You know, where are the experts? How can we utilize their skills? Can we use them through code clubs or other kind of activities? Can we connect on Twitter? And I think as teachers, it can be very easy to become isolated within your classroom, and I think we need to kind of break out of that, and we need to connect with other people, whether that's physically at events or through social media, and there's lots of ways we can do that. Thank you to all of you. Now, they were the kind of like the questions that we discussed beforehand, but we're going to have a bit of a look to see if we've got any additional questions. So I think we've got one that I'm going to share with you here if my laptop decides to work. So this was a question that came in, which is, what's next on your to-do list for your school or for your students? And I think we'll just, let's start with Donna on that one. So what's the next thing that you want to be doing with your students or in your school?
Okay, so we recently crowdfunded on Rocket Fund for a tech treasure chest, which was for extra equipment. I'm very lucky, I've got a computing suite, but obviously some of our classrooms, we learn in the classrooms, to take around school and to start to use with Raspberry Pi kits, code bugs, Codapillars. I want to try and start that further down school as well and catch the early years more than we are doing at the moment. And then I'm also I was very fortunate to go and see Ada the Show last week at Central Library Manchester. Inspired by the dress, and now working with the Foundation for Digital Creativity to look at some sort of wearable competition that will involve, hopefully will involve a lot more children. We can take them to events and we can involve them in this competition. I already do the basics of wearables in class as well, so I want to try and roll that out as well, looking at paper circuits, sewable circuits, looking at Power Code bugs and Raspberry Pi, and just giving them, taking the blinkers off even more than we have done, and giving them opportunity to see what is possible so that they can make informed choices to continue with their computer science, hopefully as a career rather than just another subject at high school and beyond.
That sounds really, really interesting, Donna, particularly the wearable stuff. That's really a growing kind of trend, and it really kind of engages lots of people across your cohorts. That sounds really exciting. Lindsay, what's next for you and your school and your learners?
We're looking to develop our 2018 programme with YHack, which is our regional makers and builders club. Lots of projects going on there. We have some kids who are taking on projects that they started that grew out of a hydrogen hack last summer. So that's still continuing. Looking to help another group get much more independent in terms of soldering and making and building. So we're going to have a sort of mini computer project running throughout next term as well. And then on the other end of things, we're also looking to bolster students who are really interested in getting into the industry. And so we have a program of students who have left, who are coming back to speak with our crew and give them ideas about internships, projects, summer programs, lots of holiday things. There are so many, companies, GCHQ and so on, who are running these events now for students, and it is largely a matter of them finding out about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, get into your local community, find what organisations are doing in terms of competitions, and getting involved is great. Again, that sounds really exciting, and hopefully if we're down your way, we might try and pop along and see what you guys are up to. And then Matt, how about you? What kind of things, priorities for you over in the States?
So I'm in the midst of a physical computing class with a Raspberry Pi, and it was, again, sort of another leap without a net, and we're pulling together supplies as we go. So I'm looking forward, after our winter break, to getting some more hats in, some Explorer hats, some Sense hats, so students can start incorporating those into their projects. We've gone through some initial activities where they're messing around with the electronics, and some motors, some piezo buzzers, some LEDs, which is really engaging for the students. But to incorporate some of those other hats and modules in there too, to incorporate in there is next step for that class, and working with a few of those students as well to do an hour of code activity for the rest of the school. So I'm kind of asking them to flip roles a little bit. So instead of being the student in the class, they're going to have to design an activity for the entire class to do, and hopefully going to be offering a similar type activity for our community as well during an open house. So and trying to switch another part of their brain on, where they're no longer just a recipient, they're out there on the stage trying to guide people through these activities that they've experienced as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Interesting. I think the idea that you're building capacity as well, and a support mechanism and a culture within your learning environment, that your students learn some skills, they then become people that can help facilitate and teach other people, and that kind of that cycle continues, and you start to raise the capacity that you have to deliver great activities. These all sound like amazing things, and I hope that I'm able to catch up with you in a year's time and find out where we're getting on. So I think we're running slightly over, so I think we're going to wrap up there. We've got a couple of things to say. So first of all, I would like to say thank you to our participants, both our panel. So this is Donna and Matt and Lindsay, for giving up their time for a second week running to come and join us on our webinar. And I'd also like to flag up with you two things. First of all, next time in January, after the new year, we're going to try another session. We're going to work to create a programmable robot antenna using one of the Raspberry Pi resources. And there's a chance there for you to work along with that as we make it, ask questions, talk a bit how we might use this in our classrooms and with our learners. And we're all going to sort of have a go at learning together through that activity. If you're interested in that, that's happening on Wednesday, the 10th of January. From 4 till 4:45, that's GMT. And then the final thing to say is that it's been great having all of you watch this video. If you can give us some feedback, that would be absolutely fantastic. You can do so at rpf.io/TC feedback. Thank you for watching. We're going to leave the live stream open for a short while so that any conversations that are going on YouTube can continue. Thank you very much to everyone. Bye-bye.